Now that we've heard the story of Jesus going to the synagogue with his family, let's talk a little bit about what worship looks like at our church. At our church, we have two different worship services. We have a traditional service in the sanctuary, and then we also have a more contemporary service in Jubilee Hall, and that service is called Church in the Round. And like in Jesus' story, remember there was Rabbi Ezra, who was the worship leader, and then he had a helper named Nathan. In our worship services, we also have worship leaders and helpers that help guide us through the service. Let's take a look at some pictures from each of our two different services. Here's a picture of Dr. Howe. He's our senior pastor. He leads us in worship, and here he is giving a sermon in the sanctuary. And if you'll remember in the story we read about Jesus, Rabbi Ezra gave a message about Micah after they read from the Bible. Dr. Howe gives us a message after we hear our reading from the Bible. And here is a picture of some music leaders in worship. This is Jimmy Jones. He's our director of our music ministry. You can see him leading the choir here. If you look really closely, you can see a trombone. Sometimes we have special musicians that come in to help lead us in worship. Youth also help lead us in worship services. This is a picture of the crucifer. They bring the cross in during the processional. That's at the beginning of the worship service. And then at the close of the service, he or she will take the cross back out of the sanctuary. In the traditional service, we also have two acolytes. You can see them. They bring in the light at the beginning behind the crucifer, and they'll light the candles on the altar. And then at the close of the service, during the last hymn, they go up and extinguish the candles, or they put out the candles, and then they will take the light back out of the sanctuary. Here's a picture of a Bible carrier. They bring in this big Bible each week and lay it on the lectern, and then someone will read from the Bible during the service, and then after the service, they'll take it back out. Here's a picture of participants in worship. When we come to worship, you might have come before and sat in the pews. It's not the same as going to a play or a performance. You're actively participating in worship. So here you can see the people are singing a hymn, but you also might participate in worship by reciting a prayer or putting money in the offering plate. And even when we're sitting still and listening, we're also participating in worship. So that's a look at the traditional service in the sanctuary. We also have some leaders that lead us in Church in the Round in Jubilee Hall. So here's a picture of Ellen Robinson. She's one of our former pastors. You can see her reading from the Bible. Here's some people who are listening, sitting in the chairs. Here's a music leader from Church in the Round. You can see there's some different instruments that we have in Church in the Round versus what we have in our traditional service. Here's the band from Church in the Round leading in song. Here's a youth that is a greeter. They welcome people into worship. You can see she's passing out a bulletin. A bulletin tells us what's coming up next so we can follow along in the worship service. And here's a youth who is an usher during Church in the Round, passing the basket so people can put their offering in. So between Jesus' story, we have our traditional service and our contemporary service, three different ways that God is being worshiped. So take some time now to think about some of the things that you saw in all three of those and some things that are different.